AircraftGrade, the podcast all about commercial aviation. I'm your host Alex, and coming up this week, I review how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected commercial aviation and when we expect normal demand to return. After the FAA finally recertified the troubled Boeing 737 MAX, we take a look into its first commercial flight since the ungrounding. The United Kingdom Supreme Court approves a controversial third runway at London Heathrow, and I take a look at the miracle on the Hudson incident 12 years later. Before we take a deep dive into our main topics though, let's first round up the key aviation stories from the last week. The US is set to raise tariffs on EU aircraft parts. Palestinian Airways to cease operation after 25 years. Canada begins requiring negative COVID tests for arrivals. Singapore Airlines removes 737 MAX aircraft from storage. Amazon purchases 11 Boeing 767s for conversion from Delta Airlines and WestJet. Rapper Lil Pump banned from flying JetBlue after mask infringements. Emirates Airlines reveals its brand new premium economy product alongside A380 cabin overhaul. The TSA reports the highest passenger numbers in 9 months, totaling 2.4 million passengers. The European Union extends Pakistan International Airways ban by 3 months. Air China chairman resigns after 7-year tenure. TSA reports a drop in passengers of 61% in 2020. British Airways receives a £2 billion government loan. Norwegian moves to short haul after cutting its long haul operations. Austrian Airlines is to retire its first 767 in March. Air Canada cuts 25% of flights, affecting 1,700 jobs. An unresponsive jet prompts RAF Typhoon response over the UK, causing a sonic boom. Qatar Airways announces 5 A380 retirements. Heathrow announces 2020 passenger numbers dropped by 73%. The Qatar-Saudi blockade has been dropped, and Qatar Airways can finally start flying over Saudi Arabia airspace. A Sirajai Boeing 737-500 loses contact with ATC. Frankfurt Airport is evacuated due to a security threat. Spirit Airlines Airbus A320neo strikes Coyote, departing Houston. The aviation industry has been deeply affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we move into the new year, I thought it would be a fantastic time to look back at one of aviation's darkest years. When the virus was first reported in eastern countries, many people weren't worried, and the effect it would have on the aviation was expected to be very small. Even when the virus spread to Europe, airlines and aviation journalists alike weren't too worried. Ryanair told Simple Flying that we expect the virus to evolve and spread in the next couple of weeks up until the run-up to Easter. Probably a slowdown in the spread of the virus across Europe just as we move from spring into summer. However, by April, international travel had halted, with the TSA reporting on April 14th that just 87,534 passengers had travelled in the US, a drop of 96 passengers from the previous year. Demand still existed but was low, meaning large wide-body jets were uneconomical to fly, as airlines were unable to fill seats. Air France retired all of its Airbus A380 fleet, with Lufthansa retiring 6. The Boeing 747 fared no better, with Qantas, British Airways, Virgin Atlantic and others retiring their entire fleets. Retiring aircraft meant that job losses were imminent, with thousands of jobs lost. Virgin Atlantic has cut over 4,600 jobs, with its closest rival, British Airways, slashing 13,000. Airports Council International predicts 4.8 million jobs are at risk, 43% reduction of pre-COVID levels. Billions of US dollars in bailouts are also necessary for the industry's survival, with Germany's flag carrier Lufthansa receiving a massive bailout of $11 billion, one of the largest ever seen. The impact of COVID-19 reaches further than jobs directly in aviation. IATA reports that 46 million jobs are at risk. These include highly skilled aviation roles, the wider tourism jobs, impacted by the lack of air travel and employment through the supply chain in construction, catering suppliers, professional services and others. The effect is huge and vitally important for many countries' economies. Normally, around 58% of tourists arrive by air, and the stoppage in air travel had led to a reduction in GDP benefits from air travel-related tourism is predicted to be over $630 billion. However, the industry is starting to recover. Latest IATA reports suggest the industry recovering to 2019 levels by 2023 or even 2024, only 2 to 3 years, which in aviation really isn't much. The ICAO also expect that the reduction of seats offered by airlines in the first half of 2021 would be in the range of 34 to 42%. This is roughly 9 to 17% more seats than 2020. They're also predicting 1.642 billion more passengers, depending on the magnitude of the virus, so hopefully the industry is past the worst and will recover quickly. This is still true despite a third lockdown in the UK, as currently the government predicts by mid-February those most at risk will be vaccinated and the virus will finally be under control. One type of plane that will be crucial for aviation recovery in future years will be narrow-body long-haul planes, with the most well-known being the infamous Boeing 737 MAX. The 737 MAX was a re-engined 737NG with larger, high-bypass engines. The plane was rushed through development to compete with Airbus and their surprise announcement of their new fuel-efficient plane in 2011, the A320neo. In order to fit more efficient engines to the 737, Boeing needed to make them larger. So to make engines more efficient, they need a higher bypass ratio. This is the ratio of fast air passed around the turbine to amount of air passed directly through the turbine. Airbus could easily add larger engines to their A320 series of planes because they were designed in the early 80s. This meant the plane was released when airport infrastructure was far more developed than when the 737 was originally designed in the early 60s. This meant that Airbus could design a plane with taller landing gear and more ground clearance, whereas the 737 was designed during a time where baggage conveyors and air stairs weren't mainstream, so the aircraft was designed to be loaded by hand, so shorter landing gear was designed. The design wasn't an issue for the original Pratt & Whitney JT8D low bypass engines used on the 737, but any larger engines wouldn't fit without modification. This means that when Boeing tried to fit the latest CFM LEAP 1B engines for the MAX, they had to move the engines forward and up on the wing. This created a weight imbalance, leading to the aircraft uncontrollably pitching up on ascent. To counteract this tendency, Boeing designed the MCAS software without telling regulators, airlines or customers. This means that when the system failed on 2 separate occasions on Lion Air Flight 610 in 2018 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in 2019, the pilots had no control, so didn't know a system exists working against them. After these 2 crashes, the aviation industry safety boards around the world grounded the plane, and Boeing and the FAA were found out. Boeing were condemned for not declaring the new system, as they didn't want pilots to have to go through any extra training to fly the aircraft, just like the A320neo. This would be cheaper for airlines. The FAA were brought under the microscope for giving Boeing too much control over the certification process, and in some cases investigators left tests early, while others were performed in simulators that weren't equipped with the MCAS system. Whistleblowers also claim that when the FAA officials performed tests on the simulator, Boeing officials were present and told the test pilots when to flick a switch that deactivated MCAS. This wasn't unprofessional enough, more whistleblowers were often ignored or retaliated against, and the whole investigation was rife with safety errors and unprofessionalism. However, now 20 months after its grounding, the FAA have recertified the aircraft to resume flying within the United States. Before the aircraft can return to service, 737 MAX planes have to be modified. Firstly, the MCAS system has to be updated to improve its accuracy. Further training will also be given to pilots to make sure they are fully prepared for all the nuances of the MAX. Some other major non-MCAS related faults were also discovered and will be rectified, including rewiring the horizontal stabilizer, control system, checking planes for foreign object debris, and updating software to prevent autopilot disengagement without pilot command. As many airlines relied heavily on the MAX, especially during the pandemic recovery, naturally getting the MAX to fly commercially again was a top priority. Brazilian airline Gol was the first airline to resume flights, closely followed by Aero Mexico. But the biggest, most supportive resumption was American Airlines. American Airlines Flight 718 from Miami to New York was the first US 737 MAX flight. According to Simple Flying, American will be operating a daily rotation of the MAX to LaGuardia. They also said any passengers not willing to fly on the MAX will not be made to. The airline will happily accommodate them onto a different flight. In terms of other US MAX operators, United will continue MAX flights on February 11th, while Southwest are predicted to continue flights in Q2 of 2021. Currently, according to planespotters.net, there are 39 active MAX aircraft, with the biggest operator being American. Heathrow's third runway was originally proposed in 2009, with Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown saying it was needed for economic reasons. This appears to ring true, with the expansion expected to boost the wider economy by up to £61 billion and create 77,000 jobs by the end of this decade, according to the Department for Transport. And in 2018, Heathrow was the world's busiest airport, with 80.1 million passengers in 2018, far ahead of the next busiest, Paris Charles de Gaulle. And Heathrow's chief executive, John Holland Kay, says if we don't expand our only hub airport, then we're going to be flying through Paris to get to global markets. However, the plan was scrapped in 2010 by the coalition government, but in 2015, Theresa May's government approved the Airports Commission to a plan to increase London's airport capacity, but the plan was later cancelled again on February 27, 2020 by the Court of Appeal, as they believed it was unlawful as it did not take into account climate commitments. However, on 16th of December though, it was reported that the Supreme Court in the UK had overruled the decision and allowed the plan to go ahead. Heathrow can now seek planning permission, predicted to take at least a year. However, the final decision for the expansion is decided by the government. Last Friday, the 15th, marked 12 years since US Airways Flight 1549 ditched into the Hudson River in New York after a bird strike led to a dual-engine failure. But what exactly happened on that fateful day? The Airbus A320, piloted by Chelsea Sullenberger, former Air Force pilot, and Jeffrey Skiles, carried 150 passengers. This was First Officer Skiles' first flight piloting the A320, and the flight was scheduled to fly from New York LaGuardia to Charlotte Douglas, followed by a further leg to Seattle. The flight took off from runway 4 at 3:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Skiles was in control, and the crew first contacted ATC a minute after their takeoff clearance and at an altitude of 700 feet. Visibility was 10 miles with an 8-knot headwind from 290 degrees. At 3:27 p.m. and 11 seconds, during the initial climb, the plane struck a flock of geese at an altitude of 2,800 feet, about 4.5 miles away from the airport. Loud bangs and flames from the engines could be heard and seen in the cabin, followed by the whiff of jet fuel. Sullenberger quickly took control of the plane after it was clear both engines were non-functional. The captain continued their climb for another 20 seconds, reaching an altitude of 3,060 feet. The plane then started a glide descent, reaching a speed of 210 knots at 3:28 and 10 seconds. 20 seconds after the initial impact with the geese, Sullenberger declared an emergency via a mayday call to TRACON, which is New York's approach control. Sullenberger said,
Cactus 1539 hit birds through lost thrust on both engines returning back towards LaGuardia.
Controller Patrick Harton quickly halted all departures and tried to direct the plane to runway 31. Sully's response,
Unable.
New Jersey's Teterboro Airport was nearby, but after initial confirmation from Sullenberger, his response was,
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
The aircraft was descending quickly, narrowly hitting the George Washington Bridge. The controllers were terrified. What could Sullenberger mean? We're going to be in the Hudson. Passengers panicked, and bangs and fire outside an aircraft wasn't normal, and the shrill brace for impact over the Tannoy was spine-chilling. Meanwhile, air traffic controllers were desperately scrambling the Coast Guard and other vessels to prepare for a downed airliner.
You get anybody, you send them right over to the Lincoln Tunnel. We had a Cactus Airbus go down in the water.
At 3:31 p.m, nearly 7 minutes after departure, the plane ditched in the Hudson, in the North River section. Passengers and crew desperately escaped through the overwing exits and into inflatable rafts from the front doors. The evacuation was put into even more precarious position when someone opened a rear escape door. It's unclear whether it was a passenger or a flight attendant. This flooded the plane. The air outside was below freezing and the water was just above. Some evacuees were on slides, others wearing life vests, some stood on the wings, and a few swam away, fearing an explosion. Within minutes, 2 New York waterway ferries had reached the sunken aircraft and began rescuing passengers and crew. Over 140 New York firefighters flooded the docks. Everyone survived, with a total of 95 minor injuries and 5 serious injuries. One passenger now has to wear glasses because of eye damage from jet fuel. Each passenger received an apology from US Airways totaling $5,000 in lost luggage compensation and a refund. It's also reported that US Airways were even offering up to $10,000 per passenger so they wouldn't sue them. As a result of the 2009 incident, it's been reported in 2017 that 70,000 goose had been intentionally slaughtered in New York to prevent a similar situation. During the investigation, pilots tried to recreate the flight to see whether they could reach an airport. Only 7 of the 13 LaGuardia simulations landed, and only 1 of 2 landed in Teterboro. Although these tests were considered unrealistic and highly criticised by the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, who are conducting the investigation, as they believed the simulations allowed no time for thinking from the pilots, with the test pilots immediately turning back to the airport, as if they were expecting it to happen. A further test was conducted with a 35-second wait time after the failure. It crashed. It was decided that Sullenberger had made the correct decision. The final report cited the ingestion of large birds into each engine, which resulted in an almost total loss of thrust in both engines. The report also praised the teamwork of Sullenberger and Skiles, and the report also made 34 recommendations, including engines being tested for resistance to bird strikes at low speeds, and research into changes into the brace position, after some passengers sustained injuries. Some also believe the A320's fly-by-wire system was detrimental in the situation's safe outcome, as it allowed the pilots to focus on an engine restart and deciding the course, and not focusing on manually adjusting the plane's glide path to reduce its rate of descent. After the incident, the Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators awarded the crew the Master's Medal, which is rarely given, on January 22, 2009, and rescuers received certificates of honour. On February 1st, at Super Bowl 43, the crew received a standing ovation. And the incident aircraft, November 106 Uniform Sierra, is currently displayed in Carolina's Aviation Museum in Charlotte. Over the last week. While passenger numbers around the world dropped dramatically, the air freight market soared. UK-based airline Virgin Atlantic reported in December that during 2020, their cargo operations had grown by 50%. Because of this, while passenger airlines are cutting fleet sizes, cargo carriers cannot expand fast enough. Atlas Air, the largest operator of the 747, has just announced an order for a further 4 models, the last 4 ever to be built. DHL have ordered a further 8 777 freighters. Amazon has announced orders for 11 former Delta and WestJet 767s, and conversion specialist AirSail are now converting 24 former United and American 757 for cargo use. FedEx have also just taken delivery of a 10-year-old 777F and a brand new 767 freighter. Airlines are starting to receive MAX aircraft as well from Boeing, with Southwest receiving 6 models, United took delivery of 2, and Copper Airlines receiving 1. Peaches took delivery of its second A320neo, and finally, Canada's Conair purchased 11 Q400s for firefighting missions. All 11 aircraft were originally flown by Flybe. Data from planespotters.net shows that the aircraft are between 11 and 13 and a half years old, and some of these were supposed to go on with Flybe's successor airline Virgin Connect. However, the events of the 2020 pandemic had dashed those plans. The planes will be delivered to Conair starting this month. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you for listening to the first Aircraft Grade podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AircraftGrade. I've been Alex. Goodbye.